independent Americans around the country, around the world, inside Ukraine, and anywhere you can get audio and video content in this wild and crazy time. We are back with our special series on Ukraine, a Ukraine war report that I'm giving to you special. I think we're going to drop this on Friday night because I want to bring you a person that I think is a person of the moment, an incredible writer, an incredible activist, a voice of conscience for not just veterans, but I think for a generation, and a guy who is just out of Ukraine and joining us exclusively on, at least podcast exclusively, for his first time on Independent Americans. He's a personal hero of mine and a true inspiration in many ways. The great and powerful Matt Gallagher joins us finally on Independent Americans. Welcome, my friend.
Paul, thanks for having me, and appreciate that kind introduction.
So we go way back, man, and I think I started reading your stuff, I don't know, when you first started writing. You eventually spent some time working at IAVA and was honored to work by your side. I've said this before a lot. I think you're not just one of the most important veteran writers of our time. I think you're one of the most important writers of our time. And I'm eager to get into your trip to Ukraine, your perspective on Ukraine, what comes next. Your viewpoint is so incredibly unique, and you're also a very cool guy who I think can break it down in ways people can't understand. But let's start with a question I ask everybody. Where are you, and how are you?
I'm in Poland. I'm safe and flying home to my family in Tulsa, Oklahoma, here in a couple days, and eager to get back. And I've been here about 3 weeks, most of which was spent in Western Ukraine, and working with local citizens on basic self-defense and small unit tactics.
So you're, for folks who are watching on video, I gave you a little shit before we started. You kind of got a cross between like Zelensky and Eminem going on. You got the Zelensky looking shirt on and a Scully, but you're in a civilian hotel in Poland right now. And can you set the scene? What's it like in that hotel or place, wherever you are? Tell us exactly, well, as much as you can, where you are, and who else is there? Are there other American veterans? Are there humanitarians? Are there refugees? What's going on outside the frame that we can't see right now?
Yeah, in southern Poland and the Lviv area in Ukraine, you're seeing kind of all this staging ground for aid relief, for warfighters coming in. Yesterday, Ben Bush. I'm here with Ben Bush, who was one of the other American veterans that came out with me to train these civilians, and we stopped into a pub for St. Patrick's Day. And talked to two British guys and two Americans who asked us if we're joining the International Legion. I said no, and asked if they were, and they kind of shrugged, and I told them good luck. So there's kind of just a weird mix and a weird energy of people coming and going. Of course, there's a huge mass of Ukrainian refugees pouring in from the east and center part of that country, coming up here. Maybe staying in Poland, maybe pushing further into Western Europe. It's just a lot. The racket is starting to show up, right? Anytime there's a war, there's going to be money men seeking to profit from it, and some of it is probably for the greater good, and some of it's not. But you're seeing a lot of those kind of shadowy figures with their tucked in polo shirts into their khakis. And they all have the same watch, G-Shock watch. Kind of could be anywhere between 40 and 60, and they just kind of have that. You know this yourself, Paul. You operate in these waters enough, you just sense who those people are, and they're just trying to figure out who you are and why you're there. They're going to do a lot of listening and not a lot of talking. Mm-hmm. So it's a weird place to be right now. It's certainly not the war zone. It's certainly not the front or anything, but it's war adjacent, and nobody really trusts anybody. Other than I got Ben, Ben's got me, and we trust each other.
Mm. Your books are must read for everybody. Kaboom, Youngblood, Empire City. You're brilliant at painting the picture, and I can't wait to see the book or screenplay or stories you write about this time. I have this outside vision of where you are as some kind of like 2022 Star Wars bar where all these randos are coming in, and you and Han Solo are kind of sitting there looking around, or maybe you're Chewie. I don't know which one you are, but this scene you're in, you have a unique ability to paint the picture as a writer, and seeing it through your eyes is so valuable. Like, I'm glad we're on a podcast where we don't have to cut to a Viagra commercial and I can just let you share. Let's go back to how this started. Sunday morning, I think it was, I think maybe soon after we found out that my friend, I think guy you may have met, Brent Renaud, was killed, the journalist. I've been watching. I'm in touch with vets. Who's going to pop up, right? And I knew a lot of friends are there. I know there are many that I don't even know are there. And I see the link, and it's Anderson Cooper. Okay, let's talk to a couple American vets. Of course, it's fucking Matt Gallagher. Like, not in a really pure way, because you are a guy who I think is about righteousness. And I heard you talk about why at that time you were in Ukraine, you were training Ukrainians. I want to go deeper on that. But I want to back it up and ask you, you've got little kids. Your wife, Annie, is amazing. You guys just moved to Oklahoma. Can you talk through how this went down? Why did you go? And start with that, and then tell us how that actually started to happen.
Sure. Like many Americans, I've been just kind of watching the news, horrified by what's happening, feeling helpless, wanting to help, and being very aware that I was unable to. On a Saturday afternoon, I got a direct message from Adrian Bonenberger, who's a friend and a great writer himself, an Afghanistan veteran, saying that he had a unique opportunity through his wife is Ukrainian, and they were coming to Ukraine to help evacuate her parents back to the States. And while they were here, he had linked up with some local folks in Lviv who were looking for advisors, combat veterans, preferably, to teach regular folks the basics of self-defense, small unit tactics, street barricades, that kind of thing. And he was looking for a few good men to come with him. The link-up point was Monday evening at JFK Airport. He said, "No pressure, but I want you to be aware of this because I think this is something you might be interested in." It was heavy, it's a heavy thing. Kind of went back and forth, had 2 sleepless nights, and I kept looking at my sons, mulling the risk. I mean, we weren't going to the front, but certainly going to Lviv involved a modest risk, right? I haven't been a soldier for some years now, so I had to weigh that too, and realizing that even my moderate amount of skills and knowledge would be helpful to these people, some of whom had never picked up a gun before. I was mindful that okay, Adrian, is this really as it's presented, or is this some kind of shadowy thing? Are these actual military soldiers? Is there something you're not telling me? And I trust Adrian, and he said, no, it is what it is, and that was good enough for me. I talked it over with my wife. There were, the Hemingway quote that Cooper, the Cooper piece used. It has been an important part of my life for many years. For what are we born if not to aid one another? And that comes from For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is follows an American volunteer in the Spanish Civil War. And it's based on the character's name is Robert Jordan. It's based on a real life man named Robert Hale Merriman, who's from my hometown of Reno, Nevada. And all this is kind of swirling, and I just knew that I could never look my sons in the eye if I didn't go, and telling them to be someone who helps others, telling them to be men of principle, men of action. Here was a very unique, direct way to give back to people in need. It's certainly a small contribution, and not going to change the trajectory of the war or anything, but it was it was a small piece I could contribute. So talked my wife into it, and she's been a champ throughout this. She got it once I laid it all out to her, and 48 hours later, I made that link up at JFK.
Your wife's an educator. She's a hero in my book too. So you decide to go. I'm glad you brought up the Hemingway quote, because that really was a powerful takeaway for me from the Anderson Cooper piece. And also, like you, I grew up reading Hemingway. I grew up wanting to fight the good fight. And like you, we went to Iraq for a bullshit war that we signed up to fight the good fight, and we got sent to Iraq and to Afghanistan and other places. Can you talk about, you were a tanker in the Army, so your skills are, I think, particularly relevant. A couple years ago, folks were saying, hey, do we need tanks anymore? That was actually an argument. Now we've got Russian tanks coming through streets. But can you talk about the tug that some of us feel and some of us don't? I talked to Jason Dempsey about this. I've been feeling it from the moment it happened, right? And my wife, when she saw the video, your video, she sent me a text and she said, I'm on the ground and I'm in tears. Do not fucking go. You have little kids. Right. And I said, Matt does too. But our wives, our husbands know we're thinking about it. Can you talk about why this one? There've been other conflicts. Why do you feel this is different for you? Your contribution on the battlefield may be small, but I think your contribution now is going to be tremendous because you're a communicator. You're a storyteller. You can tell the stories of all the folks that are there. That's one of your unique powers. Why is this fight different? Is this the good fight, Matt?
I feel like it is. These are sovereign, democratic people fighting for their survival. Ukraine has its issues as a democracy, certainly, but so does America. The whole beauty and point of a democracy is the people get to self-determine, and there's this giant existential threat pouring in from across the border, these small acts of defiance that we're seeing from everyday citizens. The folks even in Russian-occupied towns and villages, organizing and waving the Ukrainian flag, telling the soldiers to go home, trying to appeal to these individual soldiers' humanity. That it feels important. It feels different. These aren't a people that, despite Russian propaganda saying otherwise, that would welcome occupation because they actually want to be part of Russia. Certainly, my experiences with the citizens of Lviv backed that up, and we did. These were bus drivers, teachers, welders, some lawyers, kind of people from all over the Western Ukrainian middle class, who almost certainly have different politics, almost have probably voted for different candidates. Some of them speak Russian, some of them don't know, only speak Ukrainian, or some of them speak Polish. But kind of the resolve and will of being committed to a sovereign Ukraine is so real. It is not some media psyop. It's not some kind of fake thing being trumpeted about. These people want their freedom. They've had it now for a few years. 2014 Maidan gets referenced a lot by the local folks, and they want more of it. They want a better life for their children in this type of society, and that's why they're showing up. That's why you have a chubby 50-year-old geography teacher, as committed as any soldier I've ever seen, bound and determined to learn how to cross a linear danger area. And no, he's maybe not the most graceful at it, but that kind of resolve and dedication, he got good at it. It kind of goes back to a point I think Adrian made in the CNN piece, which is these people are going to fight no matter what. If the war reaches this part of Ukraine, they're going to show up, and they're blank slates though. So anything we gave them from our experiences and would be helpful and meaningful. And nobody was better at that than I just really want to sing the praises of Ben Bush. former Marine infantry officer, spent a lot of time in reconnaissance units. And man, he took charge, like just a natural leader in every way. Just took charge and guided these. We had a group of about 50 to 60 people coming and going around their own life schedules, and some of them are operating checkpoints. But Ben was the real deal, and ran this thing. Made sure the training progressed into each other, bits and pieces that informed one another, building towards something larger. And his presence on the ground made this a success in my estimation.
So I want to go deeper on that. And there's so many through lines here, man. Just like, knowing you as I do, the idea of you being in Poland on St. Patrick's Day, like having a pint, after this experience is got to be surreal. But you're the occupier. I was the occupier, right? And we in our dreams and our minds and our projected fantasies when we were growing up, we thought we were going to be Jed and the Wolverines in the mountains fighting the Russians. Now the Ukrainians are, Jed and the Wolverines coming down from the mountains to fight the Russians. And you have that experience of being on the other side, fighting an insurgency, fighting a resistant population. You mentioned Adrian Brandenberger, want to give him a shout out, and Ben Bush. You guys were this triad that went in together and trained this unit. You're in Tulsa, Oklahoma one day, and you're in Lviv the next day. Can you talk about when you got there? Like, how did this work? You got there and they said, okay, here's 50 locals, good luck. Like, walk us through what the logistical pieces are like and what you walked into, in that environment. You're not going into Fort Drum to train, Arkansas National Guardsmen. These are folks that you said, paint the picture up for us of what it was like when you got there and who these people are that you were training, and then maybe we'll get to what you trained them on. But what was it like when you got there, and who were you training?
Took a bus across the border. It was very cinematic. It was snowing, kind of rolling through the midnight dark of a country under curfew. So all the lights are turned off. I remember kind of the first Ukrainian small village we reached. Had this beautiful churches all over this country, and this very modest small church in this village, still lit with only one candle, of Mary holding the baby Jesus. Get to the place we're staying and kind of crash out. Everybody's exhausted. It's been kind of a whirlwind, 36 hours for everyone. Wake up, have a afternoon meeting, kind of with the collection of local authorities. Really looking back on it, it was kind of an interview process to see what we were, if we were what we said we were, and how we could help. There are Americans like Ben who show up and they're the real deal and can and will be utilized by the Ukrainians to help. And then you have some weirdos. There was a Canadian guy that kept trying to work with us that wanted to teach like a class on social justice. And, I'm not trying to make like there's a time and a place for that. I would suggest that, a war is not it. He didn't, do you have any medical skills? Do you have any military backgrounds? No, just kind of like a well-intentioned hippie that was not going to be of practical use to these people at this time. And I think that's what, I've been hearing from a bunch of different people that want to, how can I get over there? How can I help? And I just really want to stress, like, if you're going to do that, that's great. The impulse is great, but you have to have a plan ahead of time and a very specific, direct way to contribute. Because if you just show up looking for something to do, you're actually an additional burden, right? And the impulse to get over there was something I was always going to have, right? I would not have done it if Adrian and Elena had not set all this up and could vouch for the people we were working with, and I knew we'd be in safe hands, both getting there, staying there, and getting out, right? So we had that meeting,
and to set it too, this is very, very important, and what you are so uniquely good at, painting that picture of, you land in Poland, right, and you're going to cross into Lviv, which is in the western part of of Ukraine, right? Which where the heavy fighting hasn't hit yet, right? If this splits, it'll be free Ukraine, and then we'll see what happens in the east if that becomes Occupy Ukraine, or if they can repel this invasion. When you get there, you're on a civilian bus, I assume, right? And you get off the civilian bus with 3 of your buddies. They hook you up with this local dude. Where were you training? Where did you get weapons? Did you know how long you were going to be there? Take us through a little bit of that, and to the earlier point, who are these people that showed up?
So we knew we had roughly 2 weeks because Adrian needed to get his in-laws out of town, right? And these are older people, leaving their home country, perhaps for the last time they're going to see it. So we wanted to make it as smooth for them as possible. After we have that meeting with local authorities, they say, okay, we think we can use you. A couple hours later, we are standing in a abandoned chemical plant, Soviet era chemical plant. No lighting, it's dusk. It all feels kind of pretend. And then all of a sudden, over the course of about 5 minutes, 40 to 50 Ukrainian strangers kind of come in, gather around us, and it's on and it's real. And these are people. It was it wasn't scary or intimidating, but it was a kick in the butt to for me at least to give them my best, my absolute best. Anything tactical or any knowledge. I taught a class on various resistance movements. That was drawn from history classes from my college years, and it was kind of a lot of it was we kind of planned out in 2 to 3 day increments. Ben really took the lead on that to get these folks organized. Very basic stuff. Initially forming into fire teams, right, and getting the concept of a fire team down, and learning to move that way, and different things you can do both indoors and outdoors with the limitations of a resistance movement. Then elevating it to a squad, right, and pegging people as team leaders and squad leaders. And one of our big charges from the local Ukrainians were, can you help us identify leaders? This is kind of a funny one. They kind of a difference in cultures, perhaps. They were talking about, in the Ukrainian military, there's this exercise where you can you send somebody into a room, and you sneak up behind them, put a plastic bag over their face, and you see if they're fight or flight. Like that's where the fight or flight, you determine what they are. And we're kind of like looking wide-eyed at them, like, we don't think we're going to do that. We can the decentralized leadership that is pervasive to American small group units. Let's try that, and we think we can identify some leaders that way.
So you're looking for a football coach or a teacher or a machine shop leader or someone who's gotten small groups. And when we talk, squad, we're talking 8 to 12. Right, and teams are 3 to 5. So you're starting with a little fire team that can move. And my infantry background, this is what we did, right? So you start with 3 to 5 of them, and then you hopefully can get a squad. Now you've got essentially 4 or 5 squads. They're almost a company, a platoon element at this point, or maybe 2 platoons. And that's kind of how you're organizing them, basically along American doctrine.
Yeah, for the most part, with some flexibility. For their own kind of, local preferences and everything. Just kind of stressing, not just kind of the tactical stuff, because we don't want these people attacking tanks if it comes to it. But also just basic organization, right? Like knowing that, hey, I got this piece of information about, a map was dropped or something, and knowing who to call and where to call. And we stress too that, like, these are just skills for them to possess, that the choice to pick up a gun if and when that need comes is going to be up to them. And it's a hard choice. And I wouldn't begrudge anybody who decides in that moment, I can't do this. I totally understand that. But if they are in that moment and they choose to, no, I'm going, and these folks who are my fire team are coming too, they know how to conduct themselves. They're not going to just, become a meat popsicle, dying bravely. Like I stressed over and over again to them that they're not supposed to be heroes, right? Heroes get people killed. Heroes get themselves killed. That these are self-defense basics. So you asked, what when and natural leaders stepped forward. There was a guy that we called RoboCop because he just came out. He was kitted out, big strapping dude, big booming voice. He conducted himself like a police officer. We just all kind of assumed he was a cop, like an older gentleman, like in his 60s. No, turned out he wasn't a police officer. He was a very well-known attorney, and that presence he cultivated in the courtroom for decades, right? But he had this kind of natural leadership bearing, and he'd never fired any weapons before, but he has now. He has plenty, and that we took him to the range. Everybody went to the range that for our final day of training, and some folks had a lot of experience. We had a old Soviet Red Army era instructor teaching about the AK, because we none of us really. I've screwed around with AKs before, but I never really shot it seriously. This dude, he wasn't in our classes. He just kind of was an instructor on this particular day. If the war gets to Lviv, that guy's going to collect some skulls. I'm telling you, he didn't want to talk a lot about his backgrounds, but he knows what he's talking about. 65, 70 years old, kind of rolled up gorilla cap, and it was showing teachers and IT workers, how best to stay in an AK sniping position for hours on end, not putting bone on bone, right? Like very specific stuff that just like, okay, this guy's the real deal. As for the training weapons, because most of the new weapons are being pushed forward to the front, totally understandable. We had to, we up until that last day, we're training with complete rookies here. So, there was no ammunition. We were just trying to get them to move and communicate on the basics first before anything. So we borrowed a lot of kind of old stuff from a local museum. I think in the CNN clip, you can see a Tommy gun in there. There were a few Mausers being used,
like an Al Capone Tommy gun with like a drum on the bottom, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
There are a few Mausers. There were little cowboy pistols that look like antiques to me, and people, and that's if it comes to it, that's how these people are going to fight.
That's what you got, right? Yeah. I mean, we've trained. I think I remember training at some point with broomsticks, right? Like before you got your weapon. We who've been in the military know that you don't need, an AK to be able to train for that moment. And it sounds like that's a lot of the basic stuff that you all were doing. Matt, can you tell us, it seems from the outside, we're starting to see more and more women. The Ukrainian military has been fighting for many years against the Russians. There are many veterans across this entire culture. Can you talk just about who these people were that you were training, gender, age? It seems like you got old folks and young folks, but you can tell us a little more about at least this group you were with.
Yeah, we had about 45 diehards that were there every day, and then probably about 20 to 25 more that kind of came in as much as they could. A lot of those were, they're already kind of assigned to various checkpoint duties. These are folks, they're volunteers, first of all, and kind of falls under the umbrella of Territorial Defense Force, but they themselves are not yet Territorial Defense Force. They could be mobilized by the Territorial Defense Force in case of an emergency, right? So much of this was just kind of setting up organizational basics for these people to get mobilized and have some kind of functional use and if need be. So they're not doing this, as the Russians are on the outskirts of Lviv. Age, we had a young man, call him the kid, Battle Mouse, 16, 17. Excuse me. I had a couple of university students, 19, 20, who I personally was very drawn to because they just kind of reminded me of myself and my friends at that age, very idealistic, wanting to test their physical courage and their moral courage, but also honest enough to admit they're kind of scared about this, right? We actually did have some police officers, 30s and 40s. We had some older business entrepreneurs, kind of in their 50s, maybe even early 60s. And we had women, and we had a group of women that just want to be prepared to defend themselves if necessary. And one of them seems to have some training somewhere. She knew her way around an AK, and you can just tell when somebody gets on a range, gets behind one. And another who was interviewed by Anderson Cooper, first time ever pulling a trigger. But she also had that, she also had that badass quote to him that, if the Russians come here, we will have a guerrilla war. We will fight from our houses, from our dog houses. It's like the fire is real, right? I mean, this is they have all these folks have some kind of personal connection. Somebody that we were working with, his brother survived, but got shot down in a helicopter on the front while we were there, and he kept showing up every day. Talked about it directly, tersely, and got back to work. And that kind of, how could you, that kind of dedication and resolve. I mean, we had to meet it. There was no choice. We had to give them everything we had, day in and day out, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, because they needed us. And, no, we're not the Green Berets, but we're there. So let me give you everything I can.
Matt, there are a lot of folks that are pouring in there, right, and trying to do what they can to help. But there's also, the shit show element that we've seen everywhere we've been in combat. We've seen it in Afghanistan. We talked with Jason Dempsey about the potential propaganda value when I think inevitably the Russians will kill or capture an American, right? Or maybe on the flip side, when Zelensky meets, a badass guy, like Ben Bush or somebody, and says, okay, you're going to be in my private security detail, or you're going to communicate to the American people, right? We are a very unique and powerful and unpredictable piece on this battlefield. I keep using the Pat Tillman example. If you had been killed, Matt, you would be probably the most well-known American veteran killed. Did you think about that? And did it come up in conversations with you and Ben and Adrian? And as a part of that, what's your recommendation for the American veterans that do have skills, that are medics, that are doctors, that have relevant training, even logistics experts, cooks are going. Can you address those two pieces? Because a lot of vets are going to hear this, and they're going to be inspired by you. Maybe they're going to be humbled by you. But take us through that part if you can, please.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely something we gave great thought to. First we kind of got there, as I described earlier, it was so ad hoc and so fast and furious. We were just kind of taking it hour by hour until I kind of pretty much personally demanded we shut down training for an afternoon to get a better security posture, to make sure cell phones were collected before training, as one example. So, 98% chance anybody filming us is probably doing because they want to watch later or share with their friends or something. It's just not worth the risk. Especially while we're in country. Really verifying, kind of establishing with the authorities, the vetting, and making them talk through to us the vetting process they were utilizing to make sure everyone that was in there was who they said they were, and had a direct personal connection to these folks, kind of overseeing it all. And I think it scared them straight. I never got a whiff of malintention, but taking an afternoon to make sure everything was right was the right call. And I'm generally a nice guy, but I think you've seen that Irish temper side of me, right? When I do flip a switch, and I flipped the switch for this reason, because it is deadly serious. And Lviv was not under direct assault, but it's a war. It was a war adjacent city. People were talking about Russian saboteurs, right? People were talking about, uh, we were there when the cruise missile hit the base 20 miles north of us. Cruise missiles hit Lviv proper just this morning. So, we talked about all this, but part of any kind of action is unintended consequences, right? So setting everything up, setting up a strict security posture, so we weren't an obvious target, so we weren't a soft target, was vital. As for what other veterans can do, I think they can do a lot from Poland and Romania, Germany, some of these border countries. I've seen a lot of stories of medics, in particular, kind of setting up, medical camps to treat these people who have, in some cases, been walking for days and days. Little kids, old people, people with serious physical health conditions, just trying to get out of the country. I would not cross that border unless you have a direct plan. If you just do not be the goon or the war junkie that shows up trying to be the protagonist in this story, because it's not about us, it's not about America. This is Ukraine's fight for survival. We can't help, right? That's why I went. But do not cross that border unless you have a direct plan of what you're doing once you get there. You trust those contacts, and you have a clear exit strategy too. Because I think you're right. I think inevitably somebody who is going to get in way over their head, and is going to be a piece of propaganda as a result, and that will lead to other unforeseen consequences. And it's a dangerous game. This isn't Iraq or Afghanistan. We never dealt with cruise missiles. These aren't fucking mortars being popped off by farmers who can't even aim. Cruise missiles are an entirely different game. Russian saboteurs, an entirely different thing. It's not just because it's not the war we fought in our 20s. It's something else entirely.
I think that's important for folks to this is a leveling. I think Jason said in the last episode, most American veterans have never taken on a tank, right? Living like my grandfathers did, right? Like I never took on a tank, and I was an infantry guy in Iraq for a year, right? What we dealt with was a totally different enemy, and this is an intensity, a casualty rate, a complexity that is much more intense than everything except for select engagements, I think, over the course of the last 2 decades. But you have you're telling the story, Matt, bravely, beautifully, in a focused way. What do the people that you trained need, and what do the people that you saw need? Let's assume Joe Biden watches this, and you want to tell him what an American veteran who's also a well-respected, world-renowned writer thinks these people need right now. So what does Biden need to know that they need, and what do the American people need to know about what they need, assuming that Biden, frankly, may not move fast enough, may not move in the way people want to. I don't think he's been great about giving people options in ways to help. So, two-pronged question, what should Biden do, and what should the American people do?
First and foremost, they need body armor, right? Pretty much all the body armor in country right now is being pushed to the front. So, and these regular folks, if and when they decide to pick up arms themselves, they deserve that too. So body armor is a big need right now. That, from what I saw, that was the thing heavily in demand. Biden, there is a solution between the blanket no-fly zone being instituted and not doing anything. Right, I people much smarter than me and well versed in this have been floating kind of different ideas of kind of whether it's training Ukrainian pilots in countries like Poland and getting them back up in the sky, or other surreptitious ways to limit the artillery barrage and air barrage that is the only thing that seems to be working right now for the Russian military. There are solutions out there, and it's not an all or nothing, I think, on the matter of the no-fly zone. As for the American people, it's kind of the same thing as probably what I told the American veterans, right? Find different organizations that you believe in, and I'll plug my own later that I think can be helpful to people. There are relief efforts staging in these border countries that need money, that need volunteers, that need expertise, and you don't have to go into Ukraine to be a person of action, right? If all you can do is press that donate button, great. If you can get over here and get your hands on something with your own direct experience and knowledge, all the better. They need everything. They really do. If you're feeling helpless and you're feeling frustrated, that's probably because you're a person of conscience, and the world needs that. And even if it's pushing back on some of the Tucker Carlson nonsense that's being spouted back in the States right now, don't let kind of those isolationist talking points take root. We're at our best. Americans rise above that, and they have before, and I believe we're doing so again. And that's the country that makes me proud to be where I'm from, right? We can be a people of action. We can be a people that offer support and aid in times of need. It was something about, it's so easy to be kind of fall into the kind of anti-American traps, especially after the last 20 years, especially after Iraq and Afghanistan. I agree with some of that stuff. But then there's nothing like traveling and coming to a place like Poland, for example, where they, not to speak too broadly, but they value these concepts that we take for granted of freedom and independence and capitalism and democracy, because it's still new, and they haven't grown tired of it. And this is, especially much of Western Ukraine, they want the same thing. They've only had it for a few years, and it's under assault. So anybody can give back. Just pushing back on the turtle shell mentality that folks in my estimation, folks on the far right and the far left are trying to escape into. And it's just, I find it's an act of cowardice, in my opinion, and I find it disgusting.
I'm glad you named it, because I think I've been saying in this show, this is a time for courage, and courage can come in whatever form you can deliver it, but it's a time for everybody to be courageous in their own way and contribute in some way. Matt, you're, in a couple of days, you're going to be back in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I can't imagine the mindfuck that's going to be. And I hope you will write about it and talk about it. And you've generously offered to stick around for our Patreon members for a little bit of extra content, where I want to ask you what you've missed most about America. I'm going to save that for our folks in the Patreon community. But as you come back, what's next? I mean, you're not just a grunt. You're a big thinker. You think about social change. You think about movement theory. You think about the history of rebellions. You know this world better than most average people in America. What do you think happens in the next couple of weeks in Ukraine, and for those 50 people you trained? And then what happens for you when you get back to Oklahoma? What are you going to do now that you're back?
Well, for our people, they're going to keep training. We found the leaders, we trained the trainers. They're going to spread their knowledge and spread their skills. There's a replacement team of American advisors who are more specialist. We were generalists. We were building this thing kind of building an airplane in the sky. and somehow landed it, and now our people are going to get the benefit of real professional expertise from folks that had a plan and got there and are going to take them through the next stage, and then they'll have their own exit plans. So we left. It was sad to leave. It was hard to leave. You grow, even just 2 weeks, you grow really tight and have personal connections with these people. But they're in good hands, both with each other and the new crew. As for me,
before you get to that, I want to come back to you.
Yeah.
But there's some folks in this country that have kind of a defeatist mentality. That seems like that's changing. But for a while, there were many Americans who believed Russia was going to roll. They were going to take over Ukraine, and then we'd have to just build a wall around NATO and contend with it. I mean, but now the losses have been tremendous on all sides, but much higher than most folks predicted for the Russians. There's a feeling this is a moment where they can win. They can win and repel this invasion, which might create even a reverse domino effect. There are talks now of a possible coup underway inside Russia. This can be not just a speed bump, but the game changer for all of this. Sure. Can you talk about that, Matt? Do you see that and this moment for them? And you're a sports fan. Like this is not the Cleveland Browns, right? Like people were kind of assuming they were going to be like the Cleveland Browns, but now they're flipping it and they're everybody's underdog story. Can you just push that out a little bit? What do you think is going to happen here?
The only way this ends, whether it's tonight or hopefully tonight or in 5 years, is I think with Putin dead, right? Somebody, hopefully internally, is going to have to take care of this. That this is a crazy man with access to a nuclear arsenal, and the best thing for everyone, to include the Russian people, is getting rid of this tremendously vile despot. I don't have any inside access or information to how and when that's going to happen. All I know is the longer this goes on, the more innocent Ukrainians and hapless 20-year-old Russian soldiers are going to die or get horribly wounded or get a disease that ravages them for the rest of their life. Every day this war goes on, more people will suffer that shouldn't. How long Ukraine can hold on? It seems like a while. They're dug in for the long haul. Even if it costs them Kyiv, even if it costs them Lviv, even if it costs them Odessa. Russia cannot occupy this country. They can't do it. I mean, they can't even invade it so far. You and I both know that occupying is the hard part. So they haven't even gotten to the hard part yet. It's just also meaningless. It's also pointless. Ukraine will win. It's inevitable. This war, if nothing else, has confirmed that there's a sense of national identity and a national resolve that people weren't sure existed. Right? Certainly, the Russians did not anticipate this. So I can't tell you when, but I do know that a free, sovereign Ukraine will be there at the end of this. I hope its borders resemble what it has now, and B, it's the beautiful country, and these wonderful cities are still standing, and they haven't been turned to rubble the way Kharkov has, for example.
So back to you. Now you go back to Tulsa, I guess, and you need time to process this, as I can only imagine. But you guys have probably been thinking about it. You've been thinking about it. What comes next for you? Nobody comes home. Not everybody comes home from war wounded, but nobody comes home unchanged. You are profoundly changed by this experience. What happens next for you?
Well, got to first things first, back to diaper duty and swim lessons.
Yeah.
So my wife's going to put me back to work immediately, and I deserve that, and we'll never hear the end of this. But no, not to make too much of a light of it, because part of we had a discussion before agreeing to the Anderson Cooper piece of, like, we're putting our faces, our names, our reputations on this, right? Like, this means that we're going to be kind of attached to this thing. Are we comfortable with that? And we talked it through with pros and cons and decided that yes, we're okay being advocates for Ukrainian people that we work with, and nothing more and nothing else. And hopefully reminding regular Americans that these aren't neo-Nazis, that these aren't Russians who by another name. These are regular people with regular jobs, worried about their kids' future, worried about their nephew who's been sent to the front. They just want a regular life. They just want a normal everyday life. And I think in our small way, we can be a meaningful voice to hammering that point home. And then I'm a writer. I write. That's how I process the world. That's how I process experiences. I haven't started writing yet about this. I don't know when or I will, or what it'll look like, but I know I will, because that's how I make sense of the world. And it was such a jam-packed 2 weeks that writing about it piece by piece is the only way I'm ever going to make sense of it. And hopefully something interesting will result from it.
Matt, the moment I saw you on Anderson Cooper, and now even more so, I'm so glad it's you. I'm so glad it's you. I'm so glad it's Adrian. I'm so glad it's Ben. Because it's a very different comparison. But I remember when 60 Minutes went on patrol with my platoon in Iraq, when we were arguing about whether or not there was an insurgency, and they followed me around. And when I came back, I was among that first wave of people who were trying to bring the truth about Iraq to people in America who didn't get it. And we were talking about body armor, right? And that was a really hard place for me in that first wave to be. And I'm glad that you guys are this first wave now. It could have been a lot of other people. It could have been Tucker Carlson Yahoo that's over there, right? And you're not going to be the only ones. There will be others, and there will be surrogates for all sides, and that information war and political war will unfold as it always does. But I'm really glad it's you guys, because you have such heart and empathy and understanding of history, and just such a nuanced and authentic understanding of the world. And we're very fortunate that it's you guys that are out in front. And so I got to ask you one final question, and I hope you'll come back. I hope we can continue these conversations, because I think it's going to be so important to see this through your eyes. But as you come back, and you're not even back yet, but how do you feel about America right now? We've been through all this, right? The Trump insurrection, Afghanistan, everything. Are you mad at America right now that they're not doing more? Are you inspired by America because they're doing so much? But you are a master of understanding America. And even your book, Empire City, talks about a world where America won in Vietnam, right? A different world, an alternate world. But how do you feel about your homeland, your country, America right now?
Seeing how America is viewed from these everyday Ukrainians, and how grateful they were, not just for us being there, but for the support they see. They tended to be very happy that Biden is president instead of Trump, right? Which makes sense given their unique involvement in the phone calls and everything. And I think I agree with their read of the situation, which was, I'd want them to say, if Trump had been reelected, there would have been almost no NATO support, right? So it's mostly kind of made me proud to see that even here in 2022, America can be seen as a force for good and freedom and justice, and all these highfalutin concepts that feel very vague until they're gone, right? And then they are real and meaningful aspects of the human condition. So I'm going home actually kind of feeling pretly good about it. Maybe it's because I've been away, so I haven't been on Twitter all that much, seeing the divisiveness. I've only kind of caught glimmers of Tucker Carlson squawking. So I that may expire quickly as soon as I get back home. But honestly, man, I haven't been this proud to be an American in a long time, and it feels nice.
Man, I'm so glad it's you. I'm glad it's you. I have been very privileged in this path of mine to be around heroes, and you've always been heroic in my book. You've done so much to help people understand, which is in many ways the hardest part. And I think we know from serving overseas that, the fear is that you'll be forgotten, or that your stories won't be told, or the history won't be told. And you're there now to tell this story and to tell what comes next. And you've always been a conscience for America. And your reward for all this is going to be more requests, right? Like the world is going to need more of your voice and your leadership, and you are ready for this moment. Your whole life has brought you to this moment, and I'm really glad it's you, and I'm honored to know you, man. In advance, welcome home. Thank you for stepping up and being an inspiration, and thank you for being what this country is supposed to be all about, and what at its core this country is all about, man. I know that your kids will be very proud of you, and generations of your family will be very proud of you in whatever is to come, man.
Thanks, Paul. That means a lot coming from you. We belong to the same mutual admiration society, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it's a Super Friends network that we got to activate now, right? And I encourage everyone to join us. But you are a true hero, my friend. I appreciate you sticking around for a couple extra minutes for our Patreon members. But until then, I look forward to buying you a beer and mourning whatever happens with Baker Mayfield and your Cleveland Browns. But welcome home, brother, and stay vigilant.
Right on. Thanks, Paul.